Hello and welcome to another Inkarnate live stream. My name's Mati, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create your own map style. So this stream is basically going to be for those of you who are looking into doing map commission work with Inkarnate, and for those of you who are already doing it and maybe want some tips and hints on how to make your map stand out, therefore attracting more clients. That's what that stream is going to be about. A little bit of a caveat though about doing commission work. You're gonna need to subscribe to the pro subscription of Inkarnate because it comes with a commercial license. So you will be needing the pro subscription if you wish to sell your work commercially. All right, yeah, I'm excited. So I'm going to be showing you all the kind of tips and tricks that I've used to make my maps drastically different from each other, and just kind of give you an overall idea on how to attract more clients with the kind of map styles, boosting up your gallery, and trying to just attract as many clients as possible, because everyone needs to bring home that bacon, right? All right, so what you probably want to do first, and this is, of course, if you can, go ahead and open up either a regional, a world, or parchment map, and you can maybe follow along and kind of go over some of the things that I'm going to mention in the stream, and maybe you can apply those to your map just to kind of see how these kind of things work. All right. So the first thing that I generally do when I make a map is I generally think about, making the things pop out is dealing with the transition between water and land. And the way that you do that in Inkarnate is with what's called mask effects. Now for mask effects to work, you have to put down a mask first. This land mask that you see right here, all those land masses are made with the add mode of the mask tool. That's the FG layer. Now your default canvas is always going to be set to the BG. So when you add with the add mode to the mask tool, that is going to be your FG layer. The way that you do those transitions, like I said, between the land and the water is with mask effects. So if you just press that M key, it'll take you straight to that shovel icon, and that will take you to the mask options. And if you don't see the mask options yet, just go to advanced settings, click that, and then click this little toggle right here that says enable mask effects. And when I click it, you'll notice like right away that you're going to see some differences. Give it 1 second to load. You take a look here. I'll close this up. You can kind of see there's kind of a lot of information going on here in my transition between my land and my water. And I'll kind of go over each one of these things. I'm not going to go over every single one in detail. We can save mask effects in detail for another stream. So I'm just going to use my mouse scroll wheel to zoom in. And I'm going to take a look here. As I turn off some of these effects, you'll kind of see what each one is doing. A stroke is pretty straightforward. I used kind of a maroonish color because I thought that it worked well with the greens, the yellows, and the browns. And so if I just turn that stroke off, you'll notice that there's no hard line around the edge. It kind of goes away. And so this kind of creates a outline or a stroke line on the outside that kind of makes a pure line that separates the land from the water. There's also an outline. That outline is that dark blue or that really light blue big section right there. I'm using that to represent shallow water. You have outer shadows, which basically is creating that bright kind of shadow that's going on the outside. That's to further kind of represent shallow water. Kind of fades away as it goes out into the deeper part of the ocean. Remember that water is lighter. When it's shallower, light can get through it more. It's not as deep, so it's going to be a bit brighter, while deeper water is going to be a bit darker as light has difficulty penetrating because it's so much deeper. So if I turn off those outer shadows, or maybe I turn them back on, you'll notice that that shadow is off. Now that inner shadow, if I turn it off, you'll notice that I kind of lost this shadow that was going around on the inside, kind of creating a sort of a bevel-like effect. And it's really useful for kind of making the landmass pop out a little bit more. You'll notice that the insides have that little shadow and it fades out and then it gets a little bit lighter in the center. That's a great way to kind of create a little bit of depth and dimension. So experiment with this for sure. There's all these different ways you can go about it. You can create sand You could make the background, you could make the inner shadow white, you could make it blue, green, whatever color you want, play with the opacities. It's always fun to just experiment with the mask effects. You can come up with some really interesting things that really look very fascinating, will pop out and look really kind of fun. I'll go ahead and turn off those inner shadows. That last one is these ripple effects. And of course you can change the width, count, and gap, but these also help to kind of create this transition. And I'll go ahead and turn them all off, and you can kind of see again what happens, right? So it kind of just makes it look like the landmass isn't popping out. There's no transition. So one of the first things, of course, you want to do is just open up your map and then just start playing with the mask effects. You can come up with some really interesting things. You can use the outer shadow. It doesn't have to be light color. You could make it a darker color if you wanted to. This would cause a lot of your landmass to pop out a little bit more. You can boost the intensity. Watch what happens when I boost the intensity. Or if I even change the color a little bit. You see, different effects have different mask effects, different colors, have some very interesting and varying results. So definitely play with mask effects to kind of create your own style. You know, you can use a darker color to as the outer shadow to make the land pop out. You could use the outer shadow to make shallow water. You could use the outer shadow just to create a purple color to make it look like it's fey. I mean, there's all these different things that you can do with mask effects. So it's definitely a pro tip. You'll want to play around with mask effects. Just remember that caveat that you will need a mask to create mask effects. So don't forget, use the add mode of the mask tool to make your land, and then you can play with all those awesome goody mask effects to kind of create some really interesting effects. Very, very helpful. So let's go ahead and leave it as it is right here. I could obviously go to my history too and just go back to the initial state. And I'll go and just turn on, I'll go ahead and turn those mask effects back on real quick, just so you can see what they look like. Now, the next thing that I recommend is to add in a frame. Okay, frames can mean a lot. And the reason why I also forgot to mention this, why I'm mentioning world maps, is because once you've kind of mastered world maps, it's easier to work on other maps because you'll get a general idea on the composition of biomes, their placement, the stamps to use. World maps, refining your world maps first, kind of helps to extrapolate and then to make other maps a little bit better, because if you know how to make a swamp on a world map, you'll be able to zoom in a regional map or a battle map and kind of create that swamp, right? So a world map is a great place to start on refining your skills, start adding these tips and tricks, and this will also extrapolate further out as you make those other maps. So very, 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 very helpful. Hey, Brian, glad you're here. Hey, Eclipse Storm. Yay. I love it. Some people here. All right. So what I'm doing is I just made a basic frame. I'll go ahead and turn that frame on. Now this is a standard frame. All that I did was just drop the contrast to 0 and I pushed the brightness to 0 to make this frame pure white. Now there's a reason why I chose pure white. It's a neutral color, so it's not going to distract from the overall map. It also kind of frames the overall map. There's a lot of negative space out in the oceans. And that lack of too much negative space kind of gives the feeling of like not much work was done. You want your client to look at the map and say, hey, I like the way they did the composition. I like the frame. I like the way they did the transitions between the stamps and textures. So it's always good to add in a bit of a frame. Now anyone can add this basic frame onto the map and just play with HSBC. So it's nice to add a little bit more details to the frame in the map overall, and that will help to kind of make the map pop out. So if I bring this up, you'll see that I've added some details to the frame. Now the details are a mix of several stamps, several items, stamps, text, and paths. The way that I made these little flourishings, these vines, was using the path tool at pure white with no shadows, so that way it would match with the frame. And then I also took these vine stamps and did the same thing. And as you can see here, I also did down here, and I created a compass and a ship and then more flourishings with the path tool to kind of create the illusion of waves. Now, of course, if you don't have like a tablet, a drawing pen, and it's kind of hard to kind of make these nice smooth lines, just use stamps. Stamps work just as fine. Remember, if you want to change the HSBC, you can. I'll go ahead and transition to that next step, which is you want to have a map title. This is particularly to world maps. Obviously with Battlemaps, you don't need to add like a title plate or a title banner because that's just kind of going to get in the way of walking space for your battle map. When we'll get to battle maps in the next segment, don't worry. So the next thing is you want to make sure that you really have a nice title. I added in this title right here by creating a giant C and then finishing it off with a smaller text size. So the C is separate from the Alistoria. And that's one way you can do is make a very large capital letter for the first letter in your title, and that can kind of help to make it pop out more. As you can see, I added stamps into the background. So adding a nice title can really, really help to kind of boost it up. And of course, I made it white. I made it match with the frame. So it kind of looks like that white is in the foreground, that frame, it's in the front, and then it goes further down into the map. And you can even see the decorations behind the title. There's some heraldic symbols there, a compass, and even some ley lines that were added in going off of that compass. So adding in a little bit extra, throw in the main frame, throw in your basic frame first. You can use stamps, you could use the objects, you can use anything that you want to make a frame. I totally recommend that you check out how to create map frame stream. Go check that out when you're done watching this. It will really help you to kind of understand how to put frames together, when to use them, and stuff like that. And it will really, really help. So frames are the kind of that next step. And as well as that, making a nice title. And of course, titles can be very different. They don't have to be attached to the frame. You can kind of make a title using a series of stamps. For instance, I made this again, a different title. This time I used a stamp as a background image, and then I put that Calistoria on top, put it in a white compass. Again, just kind of adding some of the same elements from that detailed part. And I also threw in some vines going around it. And of course, all the different heraldry is actually on the map. So because I made a map that has the various factions or houses in it, it's nice to also throw down those factions into the title so that it lets you know that, hey, these are the main houses and they're already labeled here on the map. But it's nice to throw in things like that onto your title. And for sure, I will be doing a stream on how to make more detailed map titles. So expect that in the future. So adding in a title, of course, always really, really, really helps to make your map kind of pop out. Very, very useful, at least in my opinion. That last thing that you can do, not necessarily the last thing, but another thing that you can do is that you can also use filters. Now, I've got a whole stream on filters, so I'm not going to go into too much detail on how the filter tool operates, but I can show you some useful filters that almost work on almost every single map, including battle maps. So let's just go over some basic filters that are going to be really, really helpful. We'll let filters open up. Now, the first filter that you're going to find extremely helpful is going to be your clarity, because sometimes what clarity does is it's going to really cause the colors and the line work and everything to pop out more. It's going to get a little bit sharper. It's going to bring out that color, and it's really going to make it pop. Just know that when there is a lot of saturation of color in a map, it does draw attention from the human eye. So if you have a map that you want people to look at a lot more, let's say that you have a gallery of commissioned maps and they're all kind of a little bit dull, throw in a clarity filter to really make the map pop out, get that color, really get that saturation out, and that will really cause the map to pop out. It's a filter that I use on almost every map that I use, and you'll find it extremely helpful for your own maps as well. All right. Now, there are also other filters that you can use. What I always say, when you're working on a map and you kind of feel like there's not enough texture on the map, you can always throw in this old paper texture that comes from the parchment style. If I turn that on, you'll notice that it will add a lot more artifacts You'll notice that there's a lot more noise and action going on in that background. So it's a great way to add more noise, more details to your map without having to paint it on. So remember, let the tool do the work for you. That's what filters are for. If I turn that filter off, you'll notice again that all that kind of grain and information and artifacts that was in that ocean is now gone. So using this old paper texture with that overlay blend mode, and of course repeat and change the size and play with the opacity and even play with the layers, because you can come up with some really interesting combinations of filters. I mean, you can get something drastically different if you take a red sky filter and then put it on layer 4 and the clarity on 5. So if you play around with filters, play around with those layers, and that will really, really help to bring out colors and to do all these different kind of things. All right. Let's go ahead and play around. There's one other filter I also really, really recommend, and it also works on Battlemaps, and it's really, really helpful, and that's going to be your vignette filter. What a vignette filter basically does is it just darkens the edges. And what that kind of do is it kind of darkens that edges, creating contrast, because it's that dark edge that kind of makes the center of the map pop out more, making it a little bit brighter. You can also include a spotlight filter as well. That kind of works. Of course, you want to set that to overlay. That will also kind of help to make it pop. And of course, you see that I obviously brought the vignette filter down a layer and put this frame, this basic frame, and these details. I wanted to make sure that I didn't darken that frame. So I used the overlay blend mode so that only the ocean underneath would turn dark. And you can even see in the corners here that the land has kind of like a burn-like feel to it. So it's also adding just a little bit more interesting character to the corners where there's land. See right here, you can see it's kind of caused a little bit of a burn right here in this edge. So using overlay with a vignette is extremely useful. I'm going to go ahead and turn off all those filters and show you a trick on how to make monochromatic maps. I'm sure some of you have seen whether maps that I've made or of others have made, and you somehow made them monochromatic. They were maybe all red, all blue, all green, things like that. How is it that you would make a monochromatic map? And I can show you a couple tricks on how to make one, and then you can play around with that and kind of develop your own style. So the first thing that you're probably going to want to do is use HSBC to completely drop all the color. All I did was just drop the saturation. That means no color. And I boosted the brightness a little bit. I brought it up by 60 because I kind of don't want it to be too dark. If I bring it down, you'll see how dark the map is, and applying a color filter on top of that might not register the information properly or that filter properly unless you brighten it. So we'll bring the brightness up. I'll put it at 144, but you can bring it up to anywhere you want. You just want it to be bright enough to where whatever color filter you're putting on top of that, it's going to make sure that color really seeps in. So make sure that you boost the brightness just a little bit. All right, now next step is to throw down that color filter. And there's so many different color filters that you could use. I'll just press a couple. Just remember your HSB filter, you want to set that to layer 4 so that you can put the color filter on top. So I'll go ahead and select one of these filters, turn it on. So we've got this parchment right here. I'm going to turn this on. So parchment brings out a ton of red, and you'll see that the whole map has both a white and reddish or brownish feel to it, kind of making it look like an entirely different map. Now that the color's been removed and we've made it a little more monochromatic, you notice that the map has this nice reddish feel to it. And you see if I boost that brightness up a little bit more, you kind of notice that it brings it a little bit out more. So it's up to you where you want your brightness to be. I'll put it at let's go with 150 for now, or around there. And I'll go ahead and put on a bunch of color filters so you can see what it looks like. So if I turn off turn my HSBC back on, my mistake, turn off parchment. And I can turn this other one on right here. This is going to be your cold warm. It's bringing out some purples and kind of just blending it together. So you're, again, making it monochromatic. Extremely useful when you really want your you really want them to pop out because you really want your maps to stand out from other people's maps, and creating a variety of styles will also boost your repertoire and attract more clients. So trying out different styles of maps, see what maps stick, see what people like, see what gets the most amount of likes or views, or even clones if you're sharing some of those maps. That way you can get a general idea or a feel for what clients are looking for. So we can go in, I'm going to add more color filters so you can kind of just see each one and how they kind of look. Here's a red sky filter. You could add in, I think this one might be a winter. Let's turn it on and find out. Kind of a winter one. This gives it a bluish feel to it. And of course, there's also a sepia filter, which kind of gives it a very kind of a yellowish kind of feel. So you'll notice that the trick to making monochromatic maps is to step one, remove all the color by using HSB and saturation, boost that brightness a little bit, and then apply your color filter on top of that. So HSBC layer 4, color filter layer 5. That's a great way to create those really simple monochromatic maps. Okay. All right. So those are kind of the basic things that you can do if you're looking for kind of just boosting up your map. So if you're following along, try applying the various mask effects, try adding a filter, try adding in frames, try adding in a nice title. All these things are all going to help to really make your map pop out. So it's always helpful to try and experiment and try different things. This map is clonable. I have it on my profile, and I'll be sure to include that in the link. Okay, I'll make sure to include that in the link. I think it's the map that's also on the main page of Inkarnate. So definitely this will be clonable. So now that I've kind of explained a little bit about world maps, we can kind of maybe move over to fantasy battle maps, and we will go ahead and find out ways to help to boost your battle maps, because those are the maps you're probably going to be making the most of. Though in my experience doing commercial map work, I've kind of noticed that a lot of people like world maps. Those are asked a lot of. That's why I recommend that you really buckle down or really get your world maps down first, so that way you can again help to extrapolate when you start making more zoomed in maps, battle maps, regional maps, scenes, things like that. A world map is going to have a whole bunch of biomes, and it's going to give you a general idea on composition and all that stuff. So definitely up your world map game and then kind of extrapolate from there. All right, now let's go ahead and switch over to battle maps, and I'll show you how exactly what some tricks and some things that you can do that are really going to help you with battle maps. Now, I totally recommend that while this is loading, that you open up your own battle maps, and that way you can maybe apply some of these techniques to your battle map. So that'll be helpful to you. And some of the things that we mentioned in the previous map, that world map, are going to be the same things we're going to have here, plus a couple other things. All right, so we'll let it open up. So I just open up your battle map. Doesn't matter which one you're using. And so one of the very first things that I absolutely recommend for any kind of battle map is shadow work. So adding a shadow to things really helps to make things pop out. You'll notice here that I've painted in some shadows with a texture, but if you look at these trees and you look at a lot of the stamps, there isn't this dark shadow that kind of causes it to pop out. These trees almost look like they're maybe just a grassy knoll and not necessarily a tree because there's not enough shading. So giving the map a more visual 3D feel to it is by throwing down what's called ambient occlusion. So I'm going to go ahead and click everything, and I'm going to go to my shadows, and I'm just going to go ahead and click object. And I've already done all the settings for it, but you definitely want to play around with things. So I'll go ahead and turn the object shadow on, give it a moment to load, and you'll notice that these heavy shadows just appeared, right? So adding shadows. Now there are several ways you can work with shadows. I've mentioned this in several streams before, but I want to mention it here again because it is so really important to create dimension. If you want your battle maps to pop out, if you want people to look at it and say, whoa, that's cool. You can see that there's depth there. You need to use the shadows, and there are multiple ways to do that. Go check out Understanding Light and Shadow stream after this if that's something that you're interested in, to figure out how to do that. The way that I dealt with shadows in this map was object shadows, and I didn't try to create any sense of projected shadows, which means a light source is shooting across the screen and causing the shadows to project, elongate outward. These shadows are direct center, like a drop shadow. And the only reason why I do that is because what's really, really helpful, if you want to create more maps and give yourself less time, just having it be the midday or noon is the easiest way to make a battle map, right? Because you're not worrying about trying to create a projected shadow. You're not worried about trying to make this really long, elongated shadow from a dawn or dusk, the way that they would cast shadows. So a top-down, or not top-down, but a noon is the easiest part of the day to do. So using object shadows is going to be really, really helpful to make your trees pop out. You notice that it made my stairs, and it made all the stamps that have object shadows pop out. So what's called ambient occlusion, just a dark line or a dark shadow, can really help to create that illusion of depth. It's an absolute. Now, as well with world maps and regional maps and parchment maps, you can totally add a frame. A frame can be used for multiple things. A frame can be functional. A frame can act as a boundary in which players can't walk off. You'll notice right here that there's a place that players can try to attempt to walk off stream or walk off the battle map and try to get out of it. This kind of creates a functional border or wall in which players can't surpass. It also kind of adds a little bit more character to your battle map. Try to make those frames to be in the theme in which the battle map is. This is a wooded area, so I went ahead and used these kind of vines right here, and I used wooden beams here, and as well as the luminosity blend mode on this face. It's part of the Gothic horror wall sets, and kind of gives it kind of like a mountain man or a woodsman kind of face to it. And it also just looks nice on the battle map as well. Your players might be running around and they kind of notice this nice frame, and also contains them, because as all the DMs know, the players have minds of their own, and that's good. That's definitely good. But you got to be ready for it. You got to be ready for it. So a frame on your battle map is a nice way to make your battle map look different, because a lot of battle maps don't have frames. And so that can cause some of your maps to kind of stand out. And of course, they have that function, just making sure that your players stay within the contained playing area. Now, of course, with battle maps, and just like all the other maps, you're going to want to use filters. Filters are a great way to add that extra oomph to that map, right? So one thing, of course, is I add a vignette filter. A vignette filter, again, just like on that world map, is a great way to kind of make the edges kind of fade out, go a little bit darker, and puts more emphasis on the center of the map. So that's very, very helpful. Vignettes are great. They don't work for every single battle map, but a map like this, where you have a central structure right here, and a lot of what's going on in the map is the center, the vignette is a great choice. Now, I also recommend an HSBC filter, because the HSBC filter can do so many different things. And it's something that I recommend that you use on your world maps too, because you can come up with some really interesting combinations of things when you use HSBC. So let's just start with the hue slider. I can just click randomly on the hue slider, and I can make the map just look completely different. I've added in more green here, made those pinks into a red, making it look more blood. Red and green are complementary colors, so they go really well together. So you can come up with a different kind, pretty much an entirely different map by playing with the hue. Make it a fey. You could make it sound like it's a wasteland kind of area. You could make it green with the purples. There's all different things that you can choose. By changing that hue, you're changing all the colors in the map. So hue is a big game changer. Definitely use it, not just on your battle maps, but also use it on your world maps. You can come up with some really interesting combinations when you play with that hue. And of course, if the hue is too much, you can always change the opacity or the level of how much it's being affected. So if I turn the opacity down of the filter, I can turn it up and down. It will change how much of that is changing. So if I go over like this and I bring the opacity up all the way, it's really going to make those colors pop out. So play around with HSBC, both the saturation, the brightness, everything. I can boost that saturation all the way up, giving it a very bright saturated color. This is really going to pop. And of course, clients are going to look at that and say, whoa, whoa, that's bright. It pops out. That's perfect. It's a great way to attract clients by just really saturating your map. And of course, you can change all kinds of things. You can change your brightness. You can make the map brighter. You can make the map darker. So lots of different things you want to experiment. And of course, contrast, which is going to remove some of the color and just bring it back to pure white or gray. Contrast is useful if you really want to make the darks pop out. Remember what contrast does. It makes the lights lighter and the darks darker. So if I boost the contrast up, you'll notice that it really makes the darks darker and it really makes the lights lighter. So very, very helpful to play with contrast. So it's always good to play with the HSBC filters and just filters in general, because filters are what you use to manipulate the map, a lot of the information on the map, without actually having to change the stamps themselves, without having to retexture, without having to apply more stamps. Let those filters do the work for you, whether it's popping, bringing out the color, removing the color, adding a vignette, making the frame pop out against the background, whether it's adding extra texture to your map or grain. All these things are extremely helpful to kind of really give those maps the extra pop that you need, because what you're trying to do is you just really want to attract more clients so that way you can kind of bring home more of the bacon. And that is what we're here to help you with. Super helpful to definitely play with frames and to play with filters. And of course, always play with your shadows. Shadows are really important. Remember, go check out light and shadows. That will be really, really helpful. Of course, adding elongated shadows in different times of the day will cause your map to pop out more, but it is more of an advanced technique. So I definitely recommend that you go watch the video on our YouTube channel on how to work with light and shadows, because there are multiple ways to do light and shadows in Inkarnate, and I can't go over all of them in this stream. All right. Awesome. Hey, thank you, Cressler DM. Glad that you're here. First time. Awesome. Lots of pro tips. And so a lot of different things that you can do to help to make your maps pop out. Just so many different things. I definitely recommend playing with the filters, definitely that monochromatic trick, because if you go onto whatever it is that you're using for references, whether it's our own explore page and you find a map that you like and it is clonable, you can reverse engineer it. Or if you go onto Pinterest, or if you go to whatever your search engine is and go to the image options and you look at those images, whatever references you are, look to references to help you and try to replicate that in the tool. And a lot of the things that you're going to be using to cause replication of other styles that you're seeing is through filters. Really, filters are going to be a way to do that. And of course, if you are going to mimic other people's styles, of course, I would totally tweak one thing that makes it a little bit different, so that way you're not just mimicking someone else's style. You're obviously adding in something to it that makes it your own. Okay, so let's say that you want a monochromatic style, and put down 2 color filters. So you've got maybe a little bit of purple from the cool warm, and add a little bit of red as well with a red filter. Change it up just a little bit, because what you don't want to do is to mimic someone's style so closely that it just looks like you're using someone else's style. What you want is to refine a style that you see somewhere else, like it, and maybe even improve on it. Okay, so definitely check out the explore page with Inkarnate and take a look at any maps that you see that you like. If they're clonable, clone them, reverse engineer. A lot of my maps are absolutely clonable. Feel free to, of course, to clone those and take a look at them and reverse engineer those, or just whatever references you're using. So filters are going to be, again, the great way to kind of replicate the kind of map style that you see and that you want to recreate in the tool. Hello, Nimrod. Welcome. Sweet. All right. Well, I think that's about all that I really have to offer for right now, unless people have specific questions specifically about map styles. If you have any questions about other things that aren't related to a map style, please ask that in Discord. It's a lot easier because a lot of people will ask 1,000 questions at once, and there's just no realistic way that I can answer them all. So be sure that if you have any questions about other things, go on our Discord, ping a mentor. You're welcome to DM me. I'm always willing to answer questions, always willing to help. And of course, that's what our mentors are for. And I'm not the only one who who does map styles and goes through that. There are tons of other EA users or early access users and mentors who also have incredible map styles. Definitely go check them out, try to replicate, and of course, remember, make them your own. Do not try to completely replicate a style and not change it in some way. Otherwise, you're just kind of just doing what someone else did, and that's okay. But if you want to do it for commercial purposes, definitely add something to it that's going to make it your own map. Well, let's go ahead and Shadow 3 Remnant. How would you change assets or work through asset differences to begin your own style seeking journey? Well, really what it's going to depend upon is your client. So let's say a client comes to you and they say, hey, I want you to make a world map, right? You're going to want to go through the details, ask them what they're looking for, because the style that you're going to choose is all dependent upon what your client is looking for. And when the client asks you for a commission, make sure to ask a lot of questions. Usually clients will have an overload of information for you, so just be ready for that, because a lot of people who are going to be commissioning you for work are going to provide you a lot of information. It's their world, it's their baby. So they're probably going to give you a lot of information to work with. Make sure you mull over that information. Make sure that you kind of make sure you ask for reference images, a reference map. So that way you can kind of upload that as a custom stamp, and then when you can go over with the mask tool and kind of trace over the landmass that they created. And then from there, you can kind of figure out the stamps that you're going to be using. So it's all dependent on what your client is asking for. That's really the most important thing, because your clients are going to be ranging with a lot of things. Some clients might want a full color world map with a ton of details. Other people just might want a very parchment looking map with not too many details, and yet have things on it that the user themselves, if they're an Inkarnate user, they might want to clone it, edit the map, and make changes to it themselves. So if you're curious about what kind of stamps to use, just make sure that you ask the client, hey, what map style do you want it in? If they're not familiar with Inkarnate, show them some maps with the various styles so they can get a feel for the various art. So that way they can kind of look at it and say, oh, well, I like the fantasy world style. Could you make the map with that? So just don't be afraid to ask your client questions. In fact, they kind of like it a little bit because it shows that you are dedicated to making their map. It shows that you are interested and you're keeping them in the loop. Users love it or clients love it when you send them constant updates about what you're doing with the map. And sometimes they'll even demand them, and that's okay. The way that I go about sharing the map with my clients, the way that I recommend that you do it is to do it in stages. First one is just make the landmass. Send them a picture of the landmass. So that way they can go over it and be like, do we have the landmass down right? Don't worry about exact details right away when you first send it, because they're probably going to have you make changes to it overall anyway. So don't worry about perfection. Just send them the overall landmass, and then they can mull over it, look over it, and then you can work on that next step, which is obviously going to be your zoning, where you're going to want your mountain ranges to be, where you're going to want to put your biomes, your mountain ranges, and stuff like that. So it's always helpful to just start in stages. Start with the landmass, do your zoning, show the labeled zones to the client. They're happy with that. Start putting down your mountain ranges first, because that's going to be your main stamp that's going to help you with scale. And then after you've done that, of course, you can start putting in all your stamps and your biomes and then throwing in the textures to blend it all in. So this will make it easier to send to your client. And of course, don't be afraid to be, when you send your client things, you don't have to be rude, but just say, hey, look, for this part, I only need criticism on the landmass. Because clients might get carried away and might want to say, oh, could you add this, and this, and this? And you're not at that stage of the map process, right? This can cause you to kind of get sidetracked. And it's nothing personal against your client. Your client is excited about the map. They're excited to see what you come up with. And so they're going to want constant updates, and they're going to want to show all these want you to do all these things. So try to stick it within the stage of where you are in the map making process, so that way you don't get sidetracked, because it's super easy to get sidetracked when they start asking all these crazy things of you when you're just not there yet. So the way to avoid that is just to be very polite and say, hey, look, this is the landmass shapes. Don't worry about stamps. That will come later. I just need you to take a look at this, look at the landmass, and say if you like it or not, and to send them that image and to have them annotate it too. And they can annotate. So ask for annotations if they want changes to the land masses, because it's really difficult when they say, hey, could you make this area right here a little more like this? With words, not helpful. Make sure that you ask them to annotate it so that you know what the changes are. Okay, definitely ask your clients to annotate. Very, very helpful. Any other questions you might have? Oh, definitely Brian Marshall. Oh, Brian Marshall is probably one of the most amazing fantasy regional mappers I have ever seen. Wow, incredible stuff. I learned from them as well. So definitely a kudos to Brian for being one of the best mappers that I possibly know. Are there any other questions people want to ask? Feel free and let me know, and we'll kind of go over that. I have about 20 minutes left. Remember, keep these questions related to doing map commission work. So if you have questions on maybe pricing, if you have a question on what kind of maps do you want to add in a gallery, what kind of maps should you have in maybe on your Patreon, or what kind of things should I present, what should be free, what should be not, feel free to ask these questions and we can help you out. Obviously, if you have any direct questions about Patreon, you're going to want to go to Patreon or Instagram and talk to their support. If you have any questions about commission work, I can definitely give you my experiences, things that will help you out. And of course, I believe Cheryl, our moderator, is also a commissioned map maker, so feel free to ask them any questions. Brian is also a commission artist, I believe. Feel free to ask them any of these questions, because you know what? It's always good to ask a lot of people about this, not just one person. People have different experiences about commission work and about making maps. My suggestion to you is heed the streams that Inkarnate offers, but also go to our Discord and ask a lot of questions to people who are on the Discord, mentors. A lot of the mentors are private contractors themselves. They do map commissions, and they are going to be glad to help as well. Okay, don't forget, we also have an artist for hire section as well on our Discord. So if you are looking for commission maps, feel free to go over to the artist for hire section. Check that out. Yeah, Discord. Definitely check that out. See who's available. Scroll through that list. See who is offering their services. Look for the style that you like. All that stuff. What do you do to find your mojo to do some island continent maps? The best way you use to start and get some ideas. You know, this isn't necessarily a style question, but it is a good question. I will answer it, and we have a lot of time. And this is the only off question I'm going to do. So if you don't have a question about it, then I probably won't answer it, because if you have major questions, definitely want to ask them in the Discord. But I will actually show you a quick trick, because this is a really neat trick, and I want to record it so you can see it. So the question is, what you do to find your mojo to do some island or continent maps? The best way you use to start and get some ideas. Well, I'm going to show you a trick that's extremely useful. And I don't mind doing this, because one of the most difficult parts about making a map is just getting started. And I can show you a really cool trick. And it's also in a stream that I've done about making mountains and land masses. So you might want to check that stream out. But the best thing that I recommend that you do is to use the path tool to create a series of really weird shapes like this. Just take the path tool and just start making some shapes. Don't worry about connecting them or making them perfect. That's not important. What is important is just to make a bunch of shapes. Think of them as like puzzle pieces or whatever. Just make a bunch of shapes, make some weird shapes, whatever. Maybe a little crescent here. Throw in maybe a diamond-shaped landmass with a little bit of a horn here. Okay? So now these are going to be your land masses. Okay? Now because they're editable, you can rotate them, put them together, move them around. These templates are going to be extremely helpful to you. You can start piecing them together to make a mega continent. You can start putting them, see already we've kind of created this kind of crescent shape, or you can move it around, rotate things. Lots of different options that you can kind of choose from. So, and also when those two lines kind of connect together, you can create a kind of where your mountains are going to be. So you can see where these two land masses connect right there. That's where your mountain range is going to be. Okay. Right here too. There's going to be a mountain range right there. So by using paths, you can also use them to create the lines where the mountains clash. Because one way that mountains are created is by land smashing up against each other and pushing the land formation up, creating a mountain. So this method of using path tool templates is a great way to, one, put down your continents and move them around, because you can't move the FG layer or the BG layer. The mask is not movable at this time. So using the paths is a great way to create all these templates and make that landmass. Extremely useful, great thing to do when you're kind of confused about your landmasses. And this way you won't put down some land and be like, I don't like it, and then delete it again. That's annoying. You don't want to do that. Once you've put that template together, you can now go in and just start filling in the space with the mask tool. You see, once you've got it all settled and put together, just go in now and just fill it in. I usually start with the outline first, with just an outline, of course, and then I fill that in. Okay, so this method is a great method. I totally recommend you do it, and you can come up with all kinds of funky shapes by putting all these little path puzzle pieces together to make your land masses. So that's the quickest way that I know of, because you're not going to spend your time being, I don't like that, delete, I don't like that, delete, I don't like that, delete. This way, you'll already have a basic idea of what the shape will look like and everything. Once it's been figured out, you've placed it where you want it, fill it in with the add mode of the mask tool. It's as simple as that. Extremely helpful and useful, at least it is in my opinion. So definitely go ahead and do that. That's a great question. I really like that question. So thanks for asking that. Is there any questions people might have specifically though about commission work? Oh, when you're commission work, do you charge set price or do I do an hourly rate? So the way that you would look at, the way that I do commissions, and this is not what you have to do, but this has worked for me in the past, is I usually do it by an hourly rate. And the hourly rate is just dependent on really where you are, where your economy might be. Think about what your clients can afford and things like that. You definitely don't want to shortchange yourself when it comes to your hourly rate. But at the same time, if it's so high, you're probably going to get less commissions. So it's really up to you. If this is a side hustle, this is not your main job, then you can probably take that hit and just set your prices to be just a little bit lower to be competitive, but don't have the price be so low that you're being gypped. You want to be paid close to the value of your labor, but at the same time, you want to attract more clientele, and that can be difficult. So you need to decide for yourself what you want that price to be. And the way that I normally set up the payments, and I recommend you do the same, is to say you go ahead and go over the map, look how much work they want, decide how many hours it's going to take, then add up those hours with your hourly rate, and then let them know how much that's going to be. And of course, if they agree to that price, then you're going to want to say, hey, go ahead and please pay half of the quote first, so that way you can get half of your money, and that way you're not getting paid at the end. You know, most clients are not going to be shady. They're not going to run off with your map, but some might. And so some levels of protection are absolutely helpful. So that's why I do half upon completion and half in the beginning. This way you'll get some pay in the beginning. That way you're not being completely gypped if they end up not being true or being honest with you. Of course, most clients are going to be honest. They will generally pay you. So that's very uncommon. I don't know about Cheryl and Becca and the other ones in here. Generally, you're going to be asking for a little bit of upfront and a little at the end. So upfront for all could be just fine, though I think a lot of users kind of like it better because it's just cheaper for them. It'll be easier for them to say, hey, pay half now in the beginning. This will also help, because asking for the full amount right away, that person might not have the funds at the time or whatever. So it's just easier on them to say half up front, half at the end, but that is completely up to you and your discretion. That works for me. The other thing that was mentioned by the Musical Rogue is don't ever give the final version without the full payment. So what I like to do is just make a screenshot, or to do an export in 1K or in 1K. So it's just a little bit blurry. Okay. And that way, if you send them the completed map in an 8K, and they might decide they want to run off. So send them a lower resolution map, not so blurry that they can't see the details of it, but not enough to where they're not going to run off with it. And you can show it to them and they can say, yeah, I like this, I don't like this. And then once the final payment has come through, send them the 8K or the clone URL, whatever it is that you want to use. And of course, you can always throw down a watermark in your previews. Absolutely, Roman Tyrant. Absolutely throw down a watermark. Something I totally recommend. You don't want to get gypped on your payment. Make sure that you, of course, just send them a watermark or a lower resolution, whatever works for you. Lots of different ways to go about it. Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have them up. All right. So you get the general idea. Just make sure that there are the two things that I recommend. One, make sure that you don't gyp yourself. You want to create a rate that is competitive and worth the value of your labor, or very close to it. And of course, you want to also have the rate low enough, not low, but low enough to where you're going to have your clients be able to afford it. Because the higher your rate is, you're going to have less clients. That's just the way it is. Okay, because not everyone's going to be able to afford your services, and that's okay. If you're just doing it as a side hustle, it's not so bad. If it's your main bread and butter, that's a whole different story. So just kind of remember to set a rate that's going to be, fair to yourself, but also fair to your customer. And of course, never give away your map. Never give away the map without getting the full payment. You want to make sure that you get that full payment, because you want to be paid the value of your labor. You want your maps. Okay, well, I think that is the end of the stream, unless there's another question. We've got 7 minutes left. One more question concerning map commissions, and that's fine. If not, we'll call it good, and we can kind of go over real quickly what the next stream is going to be about. So I'll just give you guys a couple seconds to ask another question. And if no questions pop up, I'm going to show you what we're going to be doing next. Oh yeah, do not floor your prices. Absolutely. All right, yes, you absolutely deserve to be paid your value of your labor. 100%, I totally agree. Okay, so let's just go ahead and, since there's not any other questions that I can see, why don't we move on to what we're going to be doing next week. Next week is going to be awesome. I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this stuff. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm an old man, and I used to play a ton of video games in the 1990s, and the styles, Super NES, and some of those great old, what are called top-down RPG maps, in which you're just seeing two faces. I'll be making this in this next stream, showing you how to make this as well, and how easy it is to kind of put together. This this map right here will be clonable. You'll be able to put your own stuff together, but this stream is going to focus on your classic RPG top-down maps. And they're absolutely usable as battle maps as well. Obviously not clearly as functional as your orthographic top-down battle maps, but you can still run these maps as battle maps. I've ran a couple tests and they do work just fine. It just depends on the placement and how busy your floor is. So we'll be going over how to make this stuff, how to use it, and all that stuff. So super exciting. I'm really excited about this stuff. I'll show you how to make all this stuff. And of course, this map will be clonable next week when the stream is not just a couple days away. So we'll be going over this. This is going to be really fun. Go ahead and sign up for this and we'll go ahead and go over how to make this stuff. So whether you're making a game yourself or if you prefer battle maps with a bit of a backdrop to them, or if you just have a feel for nostalgia, if you don't like this kind of style, you can also use these for one-shots. You can make a big old one-shot with this. There's so many applications for this. It's not usable for everybody, I understand, but it is a super fun style and I really want to show you how to do it. So definitely check that out in the next stream. That's going to be on Wednesday, the 28th, 3 p.m. PST. Check it out. All right, there's no more questions. I've told you what you can do. Of course, feel free to reach out. Oh yeah, Castlevania for sure. Feel free to check out. Feel free to go on that Discord. Feel free to ask myself and of course any of the mentors questions. I don't have all the answers. I never could. And most of my knowledge comes from the community as a whole anyway. So all of you are helping me to get better. And so I'm going to be returning that back to you and help you to get better too. All right. Hey, thank you so much. Please stay safe and healthy and merry map making and best of luck in your map commission work. All right. I will see you all next Wednesday or on Discord. Take care, everybody.